Hello, and welcome to NAEA's 6th Town Hall, Arts Are Education, an advocacy conversation. This is an important presentation and a special edition town hall, and you're going to get some key information and meet some very special guests shortly. As we all know, we're wearing multiple hats as art educators, and one of them is advocating for our programs and our positions in arts education overall. Tonight, we'll dive into this topic and introduce a new initiative as well as some great immediate resources that you can put to use. I'm Mario Rosero. I have the great honor and privilege of being the Executive Director of the National Art Education Association. And I'm a lifelong art educator, having spent about 10 years in the elementary, middle school visual art classroom in Pittsburgh and Chicago, and then another 12 years in Chicago Public Schools, Central Office Administration, and then a little bit of time at the Kennedy Center before joining NAEA. So I've been fighting these battles alongside you for many, many years. Before we get started, I always like to take a moment to acknowledge the Native peoples and Native lands in our own communities where we all come from and pay our homage and respect. And I also like to acknowledge everything that everyone has lived through, both ups and downs in this past year during the pandemic. And of course, as we know, February is Black History Month, but at NAEA, we celebrate inclusivity and embracing all of diversity and all of our members and students, and really work to be as inclusive and reflective as possible. So please join me in celebrating all of our folks. Okay. So a couple logistical things. Closed captioning is an option for everyone. You can find that under transcript at the bottom of your Zoom. So feel free to turn that on if that's helpful to you. And if you haven't joined a town hall before, we offer these town hall experiences as a means to meet members and art educators where they are right now in the current moment. There's a lot of resources and PDFs and documents and online resources. And we wanted to make sure that we were also having live conversations on the topics that matter most to our members. So in order to live up to the town hall portion of these sessions, folks that register submit questions in advance, and then those questions become part of a conversation. We'll do our best to leave time at the end for questions if time allows. And I want to talk a little bit about our format for the town halls. We do a long conversation. That doesn't mean that it's 3 hours in length. It actually means that it's a conversational relay. So you'll see a pair of individuals begin a conversation. They'll have 6 minutes total for that exchange. At minute 5, there will be a chime or a bell that indicates 1 minute left. They'll wrap up their conversation. One of the panelists will exit the conversation, a new person will appear, and the conversational relay will continue. It's okay, it'll all make sense when you see it. It works really well for us. It's just a great way to get multiple vantage points and perspectives on the same topic and follow an interesting conversational through line. Please know that we had over 400 folks register for tonight, and you can see our numbers growing there under the participant number. And this is also streaming on Facebook Live for anyone that wants to catch us there. We always recommend watching this in speaker view. And like I said, tonight is a bit of a modified format for our town hall. So we're actually going to start with a presentation, which will take about half of our time. And then we're going to dive into our conversation with our special guest. So we're going to go ahead and transition to the presentation portion right now, if you'll follow along with me. So magically your screen will change. And just so I can acknowledge my good colleagues, Dennis and Krista, who are behind the scenes making all this magic happen. So yeah, so if we can get that to go full screen, that would be awesome. So what we're going over is the Arts Are Education campaign. And this is a new national campaign in support of arts education for our students. Great, just give us 1 sec here as we get our slides just in order here. Perfect, that looks great, thank you. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and go to the next slide. You'll find that there are QR codes, links, and resources across this entire presentation. And I really want to put props out to our national arts education colleagues across all art forms and disciplines. And locally, it may be hard to see that we work really well together. And I really want to emphasize the collaboration that happens among all the art forms. But AEP, AATE, of course, us, the Educational Theater Association, the National Association for Music Education, National Dance Education Organization, CDAE, the State Education Agency Directors of Art Education, and of course, Young Audiences Arts for Learning. All these folks come together under the banner of National Coalition for Core Art Standards. So the most recent arts standards that were put out, this group really worked to champion and write and create and communicate, but also have joined forces for this campaign. So I appreciate my colleagues who helped to put these materials together. And so we're sharing across art forms and platforms. We can go to the next slide. So the first couple slides here just cover things that we know as art educators. So often when we're making the case for arts education, we say that we know, we prove that we know, we offer data and evidence that we know that arts education nurtures healthy, inclusive communities, and it's a space where multiple viewpoints are respected and welcomed. We promote cultural awareness and civil discourse and exchange. We support the social, emotional well-being of our students and our communities. And I think we all know that our arts studios create safe and welcoming spaces for our learners. And then we also provide multiple different pathways and outlets for creative voice and communication of ideas, especially in a time like now where we are really reflecting what's going on in the world around us. And we also know that art education is a part of a well-rounded education, and that is included in our most recent federal legislation, ESSA. And it's really named, we had a question that was submitted around the arts being part of core content. And the arts have been part of core content for, I think it's over a decade. It's been in federal legislation under multiple administrations. And I think the real question for us is, how do we make that policy live and breathe to ensure that the arts are thriving in every school across the country? Next slide. Thank you. We also know that there, in addition to ongoing persistent challenges, as art educators, we're constantly wearing multiple hats. Like I started by saying, we're not only responsible for the instruction and the assessment in our art form and our content area, but are also often wearing the hats of advocate, community builder, fundraiser, et cetera. But, living through this current year, we've been a little bit more of emergency mode in responding to and meeting the needs of this current environment as a result of COVID-19 and the pandemic. But as we look ahead to 21-22, there's some additional concerns that as things look like they're returning to normal, the decision makers, especially school decision makers, are going to be hard pressed when it comes to budgets and schedules and resources. So we want to make sure that we are preparing art educators to be bold and take steps to secure and advance their arts programs. So we're thinking about budget gaps and budget shortfalls and budget priorities within school districts. We're considering where there might be a focus on remediation. We know that oftentimes in education, when there is a concern or a challenge or a problem, we tend to pull back as a whole and end up narrowing our focus on certain areas or trying to make up for gaps only in certain areas. We want to make sure that all content areas are respected and included. And then we also know that there's an additional caution for very safe in-person instruction across all art forms, but especially for visual arts where it's very hands-on, very materials heavy. How are we taking our learning from this year but making sure that for future years we have those things in place? And they all take resource. Next slide, please. And so the campaign has a core ask. What you're going to see are 4 components that really undergird and provide resource for you to meet this charge. So Arts, art education must remain central to a well-rounded education, clearly. And we really want to ensure that there's full funding to support the well-being of all students and the entire school community. And so we are asking school boards and community members throughout the country to support funding for school-based arts education programs in 21-22. And you're going to see a number of levers that we can all utilize for this. Next. So we're asking our arts education community, which is not only the educator practitioners, but there are many around us in the community that support these efforts, but mobilize our colleagues, mobilize our teachers, administrators, students, legislators, and all community members who believe that school-based education in dance, media arts, music, theater, and visual arts education must remain available to all students. Remember, it's a full and robust menu of offerings because we want every student to be fully set up for success in their future. Next. So here are the 4 strategies, and you're going to get separate slides for each of these tools, as well as QR codes, but you can also go to the Arts Our Education website to get all these tools as well. So the campaign has launched officially as of January 19th, and there are a series of these Tuesday town halls that are rolling out across each of the art forms and disciplines. There is a Arts Our Education resolution for school boards to pass. There's a pledge, the resolution, a pledge for community members and organizations to take, letter to state representatives, and as well as Dear Art Educator and Dear School Board Member letters. And then all this is also organized around a virtual arts education Hill month in March, with more details to come. Next. So we're going to take a look at each of the individual tools. So what you'll see here are slides and screenshots, but you can certainly go to the active website where these tools are immediately ready for your use. So the Arts Our Education School Board Resolution, it has a whereas statement that all students have the right to arts education, and it lists the art forms and really promotes the certified art educators in partnership with community providers. Really tries to lay out a clear path for everyone's role. The next slide will show you on the right, what you're going to see is a screenshot of what the resolution looks like. And on the left is a QR code that is active right now. And I know that even though the font is tiny, what you can see is that this is something that you can fill in, and it's downloadable. So you can tailor it to your community. And a little bit later in our conversation, we're going to talk about how you might vet and move a resolution forward in your school community or district. Next. And so another tool is the pledge. So this is built both for individuals as well as for organizations. My side note is, if you are entering on the part of an organization, make sure you are the authorized authority to be able to sign that pledge on behalf of that organization. And this talks about the arts being a part of a balanced education and providing America's learners with crucial skills, knowledge, in order to be their best future selves. Next slide. So similar format. On the right, you can see the pledge. Once again, it's downloadable. You can fill in the details, and you can do it for your individual self as well as for an organization or community, but make sure you have that authority. And then, of course, the QR code is on the left. Once again, all these tools are on the Arts Our Education website as well. Next. I really love this state representative template letter because what it does is it allows you to put your address in and brings up and auto-populates your representative. So if we can go to the next slide, you can get a good look at this tool. So the middle section of this slide shows you what you encounter when you first sign on. You put in your name, first name, last name, phone, address, and then it automatically populates. You can edit this, but you can also use the pre-populated letter, and this will go directly to your representative. And with these kind of efforts, the symphony of voices, the cacophony of voices, the volume really matters. So the more of us that participate, the louder our message will be to those that advocate and make decisions on behalf of education overall. Okay, next slide. And then there are two letters. There's a Dear Art Educator letter, right, which communicates the same salient points. I think you're catching the drift. Next slide will just show you what this looks like. So it has, this letter is great because it has the live links to the pieces that we're talking about this evening. So it gives others access to this information and helps to further our case. And then the next slide is going to talk about the school board letter. So similarly, it really supports full funding for future years. So it's so important to get these, even if you're confident that your district knows this, it's so critical to get these messages out again and again and again. And I don't think it hurts to reiterate multiple times. And then this is a snapshot of what that letter looks like on the right. And again, the QR code on the left. Thank you so much. And then just to reiterate some of our talking points. So we're always talking about, like, what's your elevator pitch for art education, for arts education? So, you know, schools and communities that recognize the value of arts education in 21-22 school year and beyond should ensure that arts education programs continue to be funded. Classes are offered across all arts disciplines and appropriately scheduled, not an afterthought. Oftentimes, I promote that the art educator is the one that takes the lead with the scheduling for the school, because we're the ones that typically know the majority of the student body. Curriculum and scheduling designed to address learning loss include the arts. This should not be a two-subject only endeavor. This should be inclusive of all content areas. And that arts educators continue to be employed and teach in the discipline for which they are trained, right? We are not to be filling in other gaps. We are happy to be part of the school community and chip in alongside everyone else chipping in, but not to the extent to which we're doing a higher percentage than everyone else. We need to be teaching in our art forms and disciplines. Next. Instructional resources that are critical to an arts program success should always be available. Once again, there are many ways to coalesce resources, to be crafty, to be willing to be flexible, but there does need to be a commitment to resource. Professional development for arts educators should be appropriate and comparable to that of other subject areas. Of course, facilities should be built and furnished for arts-based activities used for that purpose. I know I worked across art forms for many years. The Cafe Gymatorium is a tough space, but if you're someone who's in those conversations around spaces, the unique needs of the arts should designate the unique spaces that we require in order to be able to do the full curriculum and teach across each of the genres within our arts discipline. And then arts educator evaluation done in the larger context of professional development and mindful of the new norms of practice adopted under the pandemic, but also that the educator evaluations are translating the look-fors in general ed classrooms to the specific look-fors in visual art educator classrooms. Thank you. Next slide. And then what can you do now to encourage other organizations and individuals? Embrace the campaign, share the links. Once this town hall is finished, there'll be a recording that's published live on our NAEA town hall website. You can share that page link and the Facebook Live link. Attend school board meetings. Be an active participant in school board meetings. You need to have an arts champion. If that's you, great. If it's someone in your community or a parent, even better. Speak with school leaders in your district about the power of arts education. Communicate your successes so the campaign website has a space to share your stories, basically. And so once again, building on that cacophony of voices is really critical. Visit the website often for resources and updates, and we'll make sure that NAEA has that as well. And then there's also a space to support the campaign financially through the website portal. Okay. What you can see is this is sort of where we are with the schedule. Right before us this evening was Media Arts, Visual Arts right now, a Town Hall for Music on the 23rd, and then the Capitol Hill piece March 2nd. Thank you. All right, so we know we gave you lots of information, And so now we're going to move into a conversation. So I'm going to welcome our guest tonight to turn their video on. So I feel really fortunate to be in the company of these two experts. So we're going to begin our conversation, and we're going to unpack some of the pieces that we talked through tonight, but also some other pieces. So it's really my great pleasure to welcome our first guest, Lorinda Rice. So Lorinda is our current Division Director for Supervision and Administration on the NAEA board. And she's also the Visual Art Curriculum Specialist for Lincoln Public Schools in Lincoln, Nebraska. Lorinda, so good to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Mario. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited that you invited me to join you. This is a really important topic that we're having right now in a challenging time.
Absolutely. And I know that it's top of mind for all of us. So we're going to jump right in. And before we get to the specific member questions, I just wanted to hear from you. What are your go-to strategies that you use regularly to champion the arts?
Well, my number one go-to strategy is to advocate and say thank you to all of the art educators out there. They are working tirelessly right now, making opportunities for our students, connecting them, and that's really important. Another space that I use a lot is social media and creating spaces for my teachers to go directly to them and out into their public for campaigning and sharing what we're doing in our classrooms. Not only the end product, but the process also. They're sharing mind maps and thinking walls and telling the story around the themes that we're working in. We also do a lot with communications, our communications department, sharing out different things that our teachers and students are doing in our departments. We are going to school board presentations, telling them the story of what we do and how we do it, setting up visuals in the city in different locations, and also connecting the people through learning lunches. Our district does learning lunches where we invite people to come in, the public to come in and hear more about our programs.
I love that idea. And I'm hearing themes of storytelling, relationship building, community building, which are all things that, we know that many art educators do, but, we always encourage folks to, step outside your classroom and build those bridges. So Andrea from Utah asked this question: what strategies do you have for demonstrating the importance of art education to other educators that do not see it as valuable?
That's a tough question, and it's been one that we've fought for a long time. As a practicing art teacher for over 20 years, one of the biggest things that I would say is that we need to help showcase what are the intellectual skills that are going on in our classrooms. We have beautiful end products, but how did our students get there? What are the iterative processes? How did they come up with those creative ideas? And making the art room visible by showcasing the essential questions and the through lines that connect our making to the real world. I think those are important. One of the great things that I do is I've been showcasing all of the work that our students have been doing that connect to other curriculum areas, whether it be science or history or even math. And just showcasing the artwork or the thinking walls, my curriculum specialists are excited and amazed at what we do. We're also finding ways to do some art integration through very specific synchronous opportunities. We have a Holocaust Lit class that works with our art rooms, and the Holocaust Lit students write poetry about the Holocaust, and then our students create artwork around that. Or we've also done some things with the science department to showcase the ideas behind cells and the different pieces that are going on in the science department. So each one of those little things adds up to showcasing how we can connect. A big thing right now is also using our students as researchers and letting them know that we're not the expert in the room, but someone else in the school might be. Maybe they need to go talk to a science teacher, a math teacher, the principal, to find out more information about the topic that they're learning about, and then bring that back to the art room. That little question to someone outside the room really opens the eyes to what's going on in the art room.
I so appreciate your value of process, because when we were preparing for this, I know one of the conversation threads that we had was, to the outsider who may not feel an immediate connection to the arts can look magical. Like the final product has just appeared before my eyes and I can't unpack or imagine how that was possible. But it's actually, to me, very scientific in terms of I'm trying to solve a problem and I create a hypothesis and I test different approaches to solving the problem. And then my piece that I create is the answer or the result. And, I think putting a heightened lens or value on the process is really critical. But I hope that our audience tonight also is hearing in your words that, at least what I heard was, there's a real value in arts learning unto itself. And then there's another path in addition to that to partnering with other content areas and making sure the arts is valued as an equal partner and combining learning and doing that integration. And I don't think it's a one or the other. I think these are all tools and strategies that you decide on what best meets your learners' needs. But as a communications vehicle, I can see how partnering could really make a difference. So I appreciate your thoughts there. Emily from Arizona wants to know, how can current or aspiring administrators be better advocates for the arts in their schools?
Well, in my position, I've been in this position for 7 years, and I would use Michelangelo's quote of ancora imparo, and I probably am not saying that correctly, but I'm still learning. There are lots of different ways that we can be advocates, and we need to be open to sharing those across platforms to work, like I said, with my music curriculum specialist or my theater curriculum specialist to find out different ways to connect and spread those ideas. But we are really here thinking about how can we create spaces and places for teachers to share their stories. They're the advocate. They're the boots on the ground. They're the people that are in that classroom listening to the stories that the students are coming up with, noticing the moments that there is the aha, the connection making, the meaning making, then that's important to tell. So I use that platform a lot with my teachers to just say, where can you tell the story? Share your story with me. An example of that could be what we just recently got done doing, a project done with Ann Lido Lane and Carrie from San Francisco. They did a project called Caring Community Members. And what we did was we created a unit about that, had our students research and think about who are caring community members in our community. And then they created artwork around those. It could be just the tool that member uses, or it could be the person themselves. After they got finished, they created a thank you card to those different members, and we shared those across the community. When those arrived in the mailboxes of all those caring community members, they were elated. They were so excited to see them. And we got feedback from them from Facebook, from emails saying thank you. That just shows that we're teaching empathy, connection making, and seeing a bigger piece of our world through the arts. And what a beautiful way to share that with the public.
And what a great way to be interconnected, right? The school community is actually not isolated, right? It is a hub of the community. And I love the ability to reach out. And then it was interesting to just hear in this last bit that it was an analog, right? A physical piece that gets a social media or digital response. And so, being nimble across communication platforms is also pretty critical right now.
It was, and that was the theme, interconnections. That was our big theme for that work.
A lot of sense. All right, and then we heard from Alice in Massachusetts, and I know this is top of mind for many folks. What are possible ways to influence school budgets to build and maintain art programs during and after the time of COVID?
Yeah. That's a really big question and very challenging. One of the things that I think that we need to think about is the resources that our education has available, having a budget, knowing what your budget is and being able to be nimble with that budget, knowing what is the need for right now, and maybe how you might implement some of those other things later on. I'm also an advocate of being a team player. We're all going to have to make some cuts and sacrifices, but how can we do it together so that there's the least amount cut from everyone? So I can be a little bit nimble this year and figure out ways that we've been able to be creative. And we're using recyclable projects to help our students see the different ways that they can create. There's amazing artists out there that have been creating with reusable products over time. And why not showcase that in a way that says, you know what, here's one way that we can work with you and save some money for the many expensive supplies that we have, but also allow our students to see contemporary artists using those same products. Artists like Nick Cave and Cyrus Kirabu and El Anatazu. Those are really important artists to showcase, to say, where can we come up with new ideas and what could we use instead?
I love this. I love the idea of like the flexible mindset, being a team player. But, you know, as you and I've talked, it's also about maybe not asking for absolute permission in terms of a budget question that's only a yes or no answer, but maybe it's about presenting degrees of budget options that support your art needs, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going into the budget conversation with a small, medium, and large size ask so that I have some negotiating room. But if I go in with only one number, then it's really easy to be like, no, that's not possible. But, you know, it's like, how do you go in from a negotiating standpoint to make sure you're setting yourself up for success?
Yes.
So our time is coming close to an end here, but we always like to end each of the pairing of conversations by asking this question, which is, Lorinda, what are your tips for self-care right now?
Well, I love to go walking with my neighbor and friend, but with the frigid temperatures of -25, we've been coming up with really creative ways to make our connection happen, have that meaning-making moment. We're using our phones, our earbuds, and getting on the treadmills at the same time and having our conversation while we're walking inside.
Look, there's always a way. And I think, you know, that goes with your theme of interconnection, right? Like it's
Right.
still happening. So, hey, I really appreciate this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. All right. I'm pleased to welcome Tara Trinity Villano, the founding program director of Arts Integration and Culture, Carlos Rosario International Public Charter School, Washington, D.C., the ancestral lands of the Anacostans. I believe I'm saying that right, Trinity. You're going to correct me if I need it. Thank you. And she is our newly elected incoming NAEA Supervision and Administration Director-elect. So Trinity, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. So I've been trying to toggle back and forth between the chat, and I tried to take note of who is joining us here from all the locations in the US and around the world. So I'm going to try and do this. So good evening, buenas noches, bonsoir, talofa, I saw a Samo in there, boa noite from Brazil. And I just want to say I see you all. So I'm really looking forward to learning and working soon at the national level with both of you and others. I'm thrilled for this new campaign. And it's definitely something we've all lived and breathed in various ways. So, and also hi to my fellow Team East people and my cellmates. So I'm looking forward to NAEA convention this year as well. So thanks so much, Lorinda, for the intro.
Awesome, Trinity. I'm so glad that you did that. That is a fabulous thing. So Trinity, why don't you get started with the same question that Mario gave me? What are some of your go-to strategies for championing the arts in your community?
So I want to elevate your previous response for maximizing social media. I do want to say, I know we are on a spectrum of learners, so not everybody's totally into social media. So I will say that if you're not on it, try to join at least one platform. And I'm thinking for arts educators like Instagram or Pinterest. Those are very visual platforms I think are great to start with. I love using social media because I like to share information to folks who need differentiated learning, right? So I'm a pretty deep thinker. I love methodologies and mindsets, but I could lose people. So I try to post digestible memes, yes, memes, articles sometimes that are maybe like a 2 or 3 minute medium read. Sometimes just a funny photo or a really cool artsy photo with a very easy catchphrase. Those are all things that really engage people in very different levels. And then on top of that, I love to have a great relationship with my communication teams. Make them your friends. So showcasing how your students are impacting their communities as we tie it into the classroom. So this could be on the local level, in the classroom level, in school. How is it impacting the school community? I think specifically to a time where we had some students who were bringing Black and Brown communities together here in DC, and we're painting murals all over the city. And this was something great for social media and really caught a lot of people's eyes. So try to think of where students are really excelling and using their public voice, and you can showcase that too on social media. Something else too is I love getting out of my own bubble. I know we all tend to tribalize and go to people who are like-minded, and we want to talk about art to people who get it. But if you seek non-like-minded folks around, your school community, around the country, around your own town or your city, and you really will surprise yourself of seeing what is needed. And it's also great practice before you talk to your school leaders who may not understand arts totally. You have to come from a place of compassion. So you learn how to bridge those gaps. So I really love to get out of my bubble as well.
Trinity, that's really a great way for us to think about it. Always staying inside of our bubble and not stretching ourselves is one of the things that might be a pitfall in advocacy. And so really giving yourself an opportunity to grow, even little increments at a time. Wonderful ideas. Thank you. So let's go into some questions from some of our members. Linda in Oregon is asking, what are strategies to engage educators? Many ask, who is doing that for them and don't realize that they need to do the work?
So many things come to mind, and I think I'm going to share a little on two. So first, just like we want to model teaching, or, as we are all educators and we're in this together, we have to model how we engage different educators too. So like I said earlier, differentiation, it still applies in this, even with our educators. And second, we really must start to think with self-direction, right? Not always what everybody else is doing for you, but how are you going to advocate for yourself? I understand, especially during this, I keep calling it a panorama because it's hilarious, with all these fun little words that they have now, right? But during this pandemic, I know that it seems really tiring too. And self-care is definitely really important. But you have to find your own voice, right? What do you love so much about the arts? Think, what can I do to further push this? How can I advocate in a way to reach my own circles? So leadership is not hierarchical. Leadership is transformational. So we're all leaders at all different levels. So I just kind of want to put those little nuggets out.
Oh, beautiful. Leadership is transformational, and we each can do a little bit to create that louder voice, just like we're talking about today. I really enjoy the piece about you talking about finding your voice and listening carefully. I look to others also, right? What are they doing? How did they do that? And then finding it in myself. Those are wonderful ideas, Trinity. Another question comes from Julie in Washington, and she is saying, how do you convince schools that art ed needs to start in elementary, not middle school? Middle school is too late.
Well, even elementary school is too late, I think. Speaking in duality of being both a parent of a fifth grader who's going to be entering middle school next year, and also as an arts educator, we all know this. Arts isn't supplementary, and we keep continuing to speak on this topic tonight as arts are education, right? So always come from that mindset. They are simply fundamental. There were a couple of things that I saw in the chat too, and that Mario was saying, so I'm going to try to remember those things as I speak, but really leveling up what arts are, managing up to leadership, mindset to your school leaders. Mario said something earlier, a heightened lens and value to that. I really loved that, Mario. We talked about before earlier when we had met in conversation that semantics, it's also impacts ideology, right? So a lot of times folks tend to use the word, especially in elementary education, play, like play for learning. And many times people don't justify the means of play as intentional or as foundational. So leaning in on considering the impacts within a child's development, right, is crucial. But you have to use a language, like create a language to really acknowledge its importance. Sometimes just saying, we need this is not going to be enough, right? And school leaders, as you mentioned earlier, Lorinda, they have competing priorities. So you got to state your case, right? So a lot of times what I've done and what I've seen other people do is you show them data. You show them data on when learners have art starting at an early age, and leaders love concrete data, right? And I work personally with the immigrant community, and I have seen the impact on creativity within adults now where countries lack simple arts education. So I have seen the repercussions of why it is so important to have it in a child's foundational learning. Championing for a professional within these spaces is also something to remember when you are convincing schools, right, to start earlier, along with designated spaces. I literally laughed out loud with Mario earlier. He called it a kappa gymatorium. I was like, oh my God, that's hysterical. But it's so true, right? And these things are meaningful. When you're stating your case, you have to state what you need too. You got to know what to ask for. Numbers speak volumes as well. So sometimes if you're just the only lone soul going, nobody's going to listen to you because they can easily brush that under the rug. You have to go in groups. So you have to advocate this to make your better cases. And I wanted to point out two things that people said in the chat that I think everybody should see. So Jason Blair stated, focus on the thinking dispositions inherent in thinking like an artist. These dispositions are essential to success in school, career, and life in general. Thinking like an artist is what challenges the status quo and propels our society forward. So powerful. Arts really is in everything, right? And we have to know that language. And then Annette Pandy also wrote, art is a language to communication. So I'm leaving those two little tidbits with you because those are from you all in the chat. So yeah, wanted to elevate those statements.
Great audience participation tonight. They're doing an amazing job of sharing wonderful ideas. I really love the way that you're talking about know your why, right? How is that going to tell the story, and how can you use data, which is sometimes a hard thing for us as art educators. But as we look at the visual world that we live in, that is a why. How are we helping prepare our students for the visual literacy of tomorrow and today? Excellent ideas. Thank you. Dusty from Alabama has a question. How do we as art educators help grow programs within our small rural school systems?
So I love this question because this question, even though it is definitely pointed to rural school systems, this could be for any school system that doesn't believe that arts is really important, right? So always ask yourself the question, at least this is what I've done in my personal experience, is where is the need, right? And why? Why do I ask that question? Because art, it can always fill in that gap. So if you think down to the core, is the need in transferable skills? Is the need in higher order thinking? Is it in critical reasoning skills? Is it in math scores? Is it a differentiated learning need? I'm going to tell you, and you all know this, arts is the answer, right? So for me, there has always been a push for integration of the arts. So find that integrated approach. Is this something that you're trying to grow, right? And integrated approach is great. You have to develop and conceptualize in arts. Envision what you want. I did this. I also want to point back to something that was mentioned earlier, but you know, finding impacting and meaningful partnerships on the local level are really, really important too. We keep talking about teams and being together and having numbers and, you know, partnerships. That's really, you need a community, right? You can't do this by yourself. So a lot of times when you're starting a program from scratch, or it's something in a rural community, what's your local library doing? Or, you know, what's your local museum doing? How can I get that involved? How can we organize field trips for our students and try to be creative, because we all are, we all have it. So dig in and figure out what are the creative approaches that you can take more in an integrated learning. And then of course, always, how can the arts create powerful stories? And how can we use the arts to create connections?
Very wonderful, Trinity. Partnerships are big, and we need to look outside of the school as well as inside of the school for those. There's a lot of community members that can really support the arts programs, especially in those smaller districts that you may not know, but by going out and having some exhibits, we may find them as they see what's going on. So visualizing what you want and then going out and capturing it. Wonderful. So our closing question in all of these town halls has always been, what are your tips for self-care and what are you doing for yourself, Trinity?
Okay. I think about this question every day. So it evolves sometimes, but today I'll say this. As a woman of color, as a woman of the global majority, I got to take care of myself. So I see you out there if you're like me, and I got to set boundaries. So I say no to something, I'm saying yes to me. I love to think like that now. Someone told me this today, rest is part of the resistance, and I am honoring myself. And I loved that. So I also want to add that I have a structure to my days of how I bookend them. So I always begin and I end with meditation. That has really, really helped me. And of course, I make art with my son. So recently I've been delving into resin. So if y'all know resin, please put stuff in the chat because I'm totally digging it in my DIY Pinterest stuff. So those are the ways that I do it.
I love that you have a ritual and that you're beginning your day and ending your day with specific things to remind yourself of who you are and taking care of yourself, and that you're making art. That is fabulous. Thank you, Trinity. It's such a pleasure to have you on the team, and we are excited to see where you take us in the future.
Thank you so much for those kind words. And I'm also excited just to see how we as a collective move forward. I think it's so important as we continue to talk about being together and stronger as a team. I'm so looking forward of this, this campaign. So thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So Mario, welcome back. Neighbor, and what is a great conversation tonight that we're having. So I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with you. We'll dive right in. So we have a couple more questions from members. And so there happen to be two related questions here. So there's Kristen from Illinois asks, what can you do to shift the perspectives of school administration to value arts education as much as core classes? And we also have Christina from New Mexico. She asked, what are best strategies in hyper-hierarchical systems where the art educator has no seat at the table? I'm looking forward to what you're gonna say.
I love and don't love both of these questions because I know them inside and out, right? And so you heard me earlier, and if you ever heard me talk, I always speak about this, which is, really recognizing our educators as the true leaders they are, right? Because not only are we responsible for our content area, but we are wearing these other hats, and it might be out of necessity. And we, part of it is like being resource constrained, you might be backed into a corner, but the pairing is that as creatives, we are born problem solvers and finding our ways around these things. Mm-hmm. And so what I like to think of is like lean into your strength, right? But if there's no seat at the table, bring your own chair, right? And we've talked about this, like bring your own bench, right? So I'm not saying that's easy, but there is a way to build relationships, build partnerships. Like Lorinda said, share your good work externally, right? So, I mean, I was a visual art classroom teacher for many years, and look, my classroom was always in the basement, right? I was like kind of locked away and sequestered in the corner, and part of me loved that, right? Because I could make art with young people all day, every day. But once I understood that my role was also to communicate the value of art education and of arts learning, you better believe that door was open, and that my classroom spread to the rest of the school community, right? So I took over every wall space, every ceiling space. We did outdoor installations, but it's the idea is that there is actually a seat for you. So through relationships, right, an art educator might find that influential teacher from another grade level or content area, might build that bridge with the assistant principal or the principal or the PTA, like how are you valuable to the entire school community? And then lean into those relationships to get that invitation to that seat at the table. Some of the most powerful art educators that I know are working with the school leadership teams on the SLT. They're embedding the arts in the school improvement plan, which every school has to have. And like I said, it's like art educators know the whole school community. They know students developmentally from year to year to year. They know families, siblings, cousins, parents. I mean, we are so interconnected that I can't believe that, when we're not seen as vital and valuable, it's sort of like, let's help take the blinders off to show, once again, there's that word interconnectedness. So once again, bring your own chair to the table.
Or bring your own bench, right? I love that so much. I really loved taking away from that. We are born problem solvers. And I think everyone just needs to hear that more often. I've always said, I love problems. I always tell my team, I love problems because that means there's multiple solutions. So always spinning things right into the positive. I love how you're like, I just took over the school. I loved it. So Charmaine from Mississippi, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name correctly, has also asked, hello, I am a recently retired university art teacher. I so want to hear how retirees can be involved in this initiative.
Well, I think about art education as a continuum, and we all need each other for the continuum to successfully function, right? So whether I'm the learner in the classroom, or I'm pre-service, or I'm a K-12, higher ed, I'm in the museum, I'm in the community, like all these different roles that we play. The critical role for retirees is that they've got the wisdom and the experience. And what a great opportunity to mentor incoming or even current art educators to say, here's a few valuable lessons I've learned. Let me share these with you so that you can fast forward past some of these, potholes and speed bumps that you might hit otherwise, so that you can hone and refine your strategy, right? Like you don't have to feel isolated and alone. Like this is how I found the NAEA community, is that my colleague Alice introduced me, and she was like, you're not the lone unicorn, right? Like here's your tribe. Welcome to this community. And then suddenly you're going, oh, right, my thinking is valuable. It is valid. I am a problem solver. I am contributing. This is a different way of looking at education, but it's just as valuable. So I think, that mentorship and that insight that folks that might be later in the stages of their career or post-career might have, it's critical to fostering future generations.
Yes, and I know we had this conversation a couple of days ago, but I'm hopefully looking forward to some sort of mentorship, something that grows in NAEA in the future. So overall, what are you hearing as trends and takeaways from tonight's conversation?
Yeah, what I heard really clearly from the two of you, as well as the messages from the presentation, are we are stronger as a community, right? And lean into your community and treat them well. Say thank you, right? Reward them for good behavior, right? That's the way these things work. Make arts learning visible, right? Make the process visible. Reach out beyond your four walls. Reach out beyond your norm and extend that invitation and extend the good work. And then I think there was a lot of messages around the value of partnership, right? And that we can learn and grow from each other. I think probably the last thing is just this whole idea of there is a leadership seat available for every art educator. We are critical components of the entire school ecosystem and community. So, we're going to keep saying it, bring that bench, right? Bring that bench to the leadership table.
Yeah, and I'm certain that there are folks in the chat who probably want to learn more specific targeted ways of how to do that. I think I've been seeing that in the chat. So I'm wondering if there are ways that we can think forward as NAEA in really, because this is a great campaign, but like maybe for folks who might not know exactly how to do that, or more introverted personalities, it might be great to speak to that in the future as well for that differentiation, right? That we continue to talk about. So my closing question for you, that I guess is a closing question for everyone. What are your tips, Mario, for self-care?
So I'm no longer a new pet owner, but I got a cat named Millie, which I've never had my own pet before. So Millie has joined me for the pandemic, and she helps me get through every day. And I've committed myself to cooking meals every night, because I think that's also a process that's really healthy. Although I make the same I make a variation on a theme every night. So I need to expand my my recipes a little bit. But I can roast a vegetable like nobody's business right now. But thank you for asking.
So thank you so much, Mario, for speaking with me. I'm so looking forward to the next couple of years, and under your leadership, you're phenomenal. So thank you so much again for having me.
Yep, thank you. So folks, before we get to some closing comments, I just wanted to ask you to join me in recognizing and thanking our guests, Lorinda and Trinity, tonight for sharing their wisdom and their expertise and their time. Hopefully you got some great takeaway tips. I want to acknowledge all of our NAEA board members that joined. They're very active in the chat, but also very active across these town halls and the association. And please know that NAEA really is a community that you can lean on. Like, we are here for you. We are ready to help you think through any strategies that might be helpful to you. One of the questions we didn't get to, which I'm gonna just address really quickly, was, how do you navigate a board resolution through your board? And when we talked about this in rehearsal, I think we all agreed that you have to really tailor it to your community, but it is helpful to find that who's that champion that can help you foster this through, because it may not be you as an art teacher in a school district. It might be that parent that loves the arts, or it might be a school board member, it might be a principal. But how, find the right protocols and processes to vet and share the resolution so that it can go through the proper channels to get to where you need it. But it doesn't hurt to have an influential champion in your community that you could lean on. So I think that was really our best advice to think through. And so if you don't have that person, you should always have, I'd say, at least 3 go-tos that are your art champions that you're cultivating over time during your career. So in closing, we're going to just go over a few slides here. So all of these resources for Arts Our Education, once again, are available on this website that you see right here, artsoureducation.org. It will be updated regularly, but all those tools are downloadable, fillable, and ready to go for you. So please take advantage of those. And then just a few big picture things. You can see this, you might want to take a screenshot. This is a way to look at the national to the local arts ed ecosystem. So if you like circles, look to the left. If you like rectangles, look to the right. But it basically talks about, really, from a national perspective or federal, we're all focused on what's best for learners. That's really what the efforts are about. And then it works learners back up. And so it's this like constantly moving cycle, but you can see that there are a lot of key players. So if you don't know this resource, Americans for Arts has this great field guide. I would recommend that you know that you should have this resource in your back pocket. The next slide is also a similar resource, which is a Venn diagram that shows the unique role that everyone plays in the arts education community. And so it talks about the unique role of our certified art educators, of our classroom teachers, of our community partners, and how those roles overlap and all benefit students. And so this can be really helpful. This was created by the National Arts Organizations back in 2013. I use it all the time. So you can see the link at the bottom there, or the reference. Next slide. And then NAEA has a great advocacy toolkit. I mention these tools not as an advertisement, but because sometimes folks don't know that all these tools exist. So I bet that the issue that you care about is in this toolkit. So please scan the QR code, visit the website. These things are all available to you. We also have a series of open letters that are on this advocacy pathway, which are right now, these were created in this past year. They make the case to school decision makers for arts programs, to colleges, universities for pre-service and higher ed art and art education programs, to museums, but also there's a really powerful piece on Black Lives Matter and how to integrate equity, diversity, inclusion into the arts education classroom. And then we also, there was a lot of chat, or a lot of comments in the chat on data. And so we do have a series of position statements and white papers that address nearly every relevant topic in art education, but we also have a tremendous amount of resources and publications and studies that have both the tangible numbers and data that folks, some decision makers want to see, as well as the data that tugs on your heartstrings. And usually you need both, that qualitative and quantitative. Next. Great. Thank you. Next. This is a downloadable. So we created a downloadable tool that has advice for, it says like, I'm looking for this. I want to advocate for this. This is my audience. It has the links to the tools that you need. So we wanted to make sure we left you with something that's immediately ready to go. So that's this tool right here. Our webinar coming up tomorrow is on collaboration. Seems in alignment with our conversation this evening. Next slide. Our remote learning toolkit brings immediate tools to the hands of those that need it the most, with not just curated resources, but specially created tip sheets to meet you where you are right now. So these are all available in our Getting Started with ED&I tip sheet. Is chock full of links and resources that are immediately available, because that really goes hand in hand with this work. And as we wrap up here, I offer my personal invitation to everyone to join our first ever virtual national convention coming up here at the beginning of March. It is the most affordable deal going, because not only do you get access to the live 4-day convention with 400 plus workshops and presentations with keynotes like Carrie Mae Weems and Mo Willems and author Jason Reynolds, as well as a specially created performance by Second City, but you also get access to this content for 6 months. So it's like literally professional development for life. So I highly recommend that folks register and join us, because it's really going to be a special time and you're going to feel your community. So we're very excited about that. And I think we're about wrapped up. I might have one more slide. Yes, we still have, look, this is a community we care about. Clearly, we're all connected. But if you join right now, you can get a subscription for free to School Arts Magazine, which we know supports our practice. I still have every issue that I ever received. So it's in my library and a trusted resource. All right, friends, we so appreciate everyone joining this evening. And I think we're going to close out here. There we go. Thanks again so much to everyone that joined, and to my